Howdy folks, welcome to the channel. I'm Don, this is Thinking Theology. Today I'm taking a look at Michael Knowles and Kirk Cameron reacting to angry atheists. Now the channel is not pro-theology, it's not anti-theology. I look at just the arguments and different things people say, the claims they make, how they make them, and make my assessments. I'm squarely in the middle of agnosticism, so I just look at the arguments being made and see what people are saying, whether it makes sense, whether they're missing something, based on my learning and experience and all that, because that's all I can do anyhow. That's all you can do is based on your experience and learning, make your comments. Michael Knowles and Kirk Cameron, and these two are looking at probably Tik-Tok before it gets banned this week. And the Supreme Court, right before I sat down, I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal that said the Tik-Tok ban was unanimously upheld by the Supreme Court. So it looks like as of Sunday, it'll be shut down. I'm not sure if, how that's all going to play out, but I think these reactions might have been posted to TikTok. We're going to find out why these atheists are so angry. I'm not sure.
I don't believe in souls. How could you not believe in souls? You have a soul. It was given to you as a gift from God. It makes up who you are. It must be terrible living a life where you don't believe the soul is a gift. Better than being afraid of death because of an imaginary sky daddy, in my opinion.
Want to take a crack at that one, Kirk? They say the body is a temple, and temples need incense. So, my guest today, Mr. Kirk Cameron, suggested that we have a cigar. We're here having nice cigars, reacting to atheist TikToks, and I hope maybe we can shed a little light on some of the errors that they've fallen into. Take it away.
Well, if you're an atheist, then what happens to you when you die? My plan is to donate anything that's still usable off. This includes my bone marrow, my retinas, my reproductive organs, and my internal organs. Anything that can't be used as a medical donation, I would like to be put into a biodegradable box as one final act of harm reduction for the environment. That's not what I meant. Oh, you meant my soul. I don't believe in souls. How could you not believe in souls? You have a soul. It was given to you as a gift from God. It makes up who you are. The stuff like that makes me not believe in souls, because no one's ever been able to describe a soul to me that doesn't just sound like my consciousness or my personality, or use vague things like it's a gift that you should cherish. It must be terrible living a life where you don't believe the soul is a gift. Better than being afraid of death because of an imaginary sky daddy, in my opinion.
Want to take a
Okay. She made some good points in there. I get it. The way she's making it, that's not my style of presenting what I think, the mockery and all that stuff. But viewing, yeah, I mean, if you don't believe in God, you're not going to believe in it as a gift. Her argument is basically a reductionist argument, which has a lot of plausibility. And I've been listening to seminars, recent studies, extensive studies, on memory, on the human brain, the different parts that are active based on certain stimuli in the environment, certain thoughts that are presented by the experimenter or lab technicians employed to conduct these tests. And I think they've gotten up to, with just 5 parameters given in thought, they've gotten up to something like 87% predictability of what the person's going to say. So the reductionist argument is that everything reduces to physical properties. And does that mean there's not something behind those physical properties? This is always the debate. Obviously, this woman in here is not happy with it, and she went to TikTok to make her case. Let's see how these guys handle it.
crack at that one, Kirk?
I don't know if you know this or not, but I am a recovering atheist. And so there is a level of empathy that I have for this girl. And my heart goes out to her because I too used to enjoy my sin so much that I would make up any number of excuses to deny the existence of God, the soul. And there's a lot of great arguments out there. Look at Christopher Hitchens. You know, he could go all day long with most Christians. But at the end of the day, she made a comment about being afraid of a daddy figure.
Daddy's home.
I didn't hear it that way.
I wonder what that relationship with her dad might have been like to cause her to think that that's where we're going with all of this. is to try to produce fear in the hearts of people or for some abusive tyrant in the sky. That's not why I be.
That's not how I heard what she said. I think she was just mocking the other perspective that people have of Sky Daddy. And God has been called as a Sky Daddy or a bearded man in the sky and such. It doesn't necessarily imply that somebody's got a bad relationship with their father because they use that colloquialism in a sense. Maybe she does have a bad relationship with her father, but she could have an outstanding relationship with her father, you know? Using that phrase, I mean, I wouldn't take the debate in this direction.
Became a Christian when I used to be an atheist. I was motivated by gratitude, not by terror.
Yeah, give me evidence of God not existing in this world.
Which God?
The
Christian God?
Yes.
Do you believe in free will?
Yes, I do believe in free will.
Do you believe that God knows all?
Yes, I do believe that God knows all.
Okay. If God knows my future, if God knows the decisions I'm going to make, can I choose differently from what God knows I'm going to choose?
I think so. Yeah, I would say yes.
Okay, well then God cannot be all-knowing. For him to be all-knowing, he must know my future. If he can't know my future, he can't be all-knowing.
I think we've got to define.
That is a basic claim that is made. Now, I haven't seen that written in the biblical text, that God is all-knowing. I think that's what we've attributed to God, almost in a Platonic sense, in a la Plato with his world of the forms, where there are these perfect attributes of perfect forms or archetypes that reside up in the heavens somewhere. So there's this idea of there's a perfect table, and our senses preclude us from understanding or recognizing what those perfect forms are. But Plato kind of had this idea that, you know, it's almost a reincarnation type thing. But his idea was that just by contemplating what might constitute a perfect dog or a perfect house or perfect justice, we could get closer to those forms, but it's asymptotic. We'll never get there because, you know, if we were to go up and visit this world of the forms, then be reincarnated with this imbued idea that we'd gleaned or gained from being in the world of the forms, it would still be clouded by our five senses and our physical limitations. And so this gentleman is talking about this world of knowledge, but he's not talking about Plato's world of knowledge, but it does tie into the free will debate. But can God exist outside time? That's sort of the follow-up argument that theists will make, or religionists, or those who believe in God will say, well, God exists outside time. So even though we don't understand, even though we have free will and God knows what our decision's going to be, he exists outside time in the normal parameters of things, and therefore we could change our mind, and that wouldn't violate God's absolute knowledge now of what constitutes my free will. And I think that's a convoluted argument.
In terms of what we do, I think that the will is actually not free. I think the will is actually in bondage until it is set free. And so there's some nuancing there that we'd have to talk about. But how I'm able to make real choices, like I think I chose to not light my cigar, and you chose to light your cigar.
Yep.
And I think they were real choices that we made. I don't think that we're just mere robots. And yet, at the same time, I believe that God, in his omniscience, knew the future. And somehow those two things coexist.
All right, so follow-up point is, I've not seen anything in the Bible, and maybe it's there and I've just forgotten it, that says he's all-knowing. And for an atheist, it wouldn't even matter what it says in the Bible because the texts don't do it for atheists. And I have a big problem with the texts myself. But you could just change that premise. This is the way argumentation works. And if your argument might be strengthened by altering the premise that God knows most things, but the future isn't one of them. So, but then that calls other, those he foreknew, he chose. You have to account for how the texts are written. If you believe that the Bible is the Word of God, which I do not, if you believe it is the Word of God, and God penned this, and these people just dutifully wrote down what God told them to say, then you've got to account for that verse if you're going to say God doesn't know the future. But if you're going to say he does know the future, absolutely, then do I really have free will? Or am I just reduced to a series of physical properties within me that ultimately are going to make absolute decisions that if you could get inside the way my brain is structured and how stimuli presented to it causes me to react, then I would not really have free will.
I don't understand it. I don't know how, but that doesn't make me deny one or the other because the scriptures say so. And that is my ultimate authority.
And then a really simple answer, like a really basic level answer to his question about how God can know what we will do even before we freely choose to do it, is just that God is outside of time and space. So if space-time...
I think that that's just talk. All right. I studied some space-time physics, and not that that's even relevant here. I think that people like to make points, and I've been in pretty hardcore Christian circles in decades past, and people like to make claims like that because they sound smart. And I'm not ridiculing Michael Knowles. Maybe he studied space-time physics and its various implications. But to just say that God is outside space and time is just another one of those claims that we keep pushing the goalpost back to account for things. Now, maybe pushing the goalpost back is a legitimate approach to this, but it's not satisfactory to me because I think they are words being used that don't have meaning. I think they're used to sort of confuse others who may not understand what is even implied by the space-time implications, what they may or may not imply. But ultimately, I think you wind up getting into, you just have to believe it. You've got to, quote unquote, take it on faith. And that as well is unsatisfactory to me.
Is part of creation, as it manifestly is, I don't think he would deny that, then God, the creator, would necessarily be outside of that. And God enters into time and space in the person of our Lord in the fullness of time in the Roman Empire, but he's also outside of space-time. So that's how. It'd be I guess a way to try to conceptualize it is that God sees all of time at once, whereas we live in time because we're actually within the creation. I guess he's never considered that.
3 reasons, among many, that I am an atheist. Have you ever noticed that most people are the religion of their parents? You'd think that if there was one super obvious religion, then everyone would have converted to that by now. But instead, most people are the religion that their parents are affiliated with.
Yeah.
If there is a God, then he must be a really horrible person. It's not uncommon to hear believers say, "Oh, God saved my baby, what a miracle," even though that same God is completely ignoring.
I will say I absolutely hate that line of reasoning. Not hers. I like her line of reasoning. The line of reasoning, oh, God is testing you. I'm like, we live in a shitbox here. There's a planet Earth that just knowing that we're going to die one day, we're so accustomed to it that we don't even think about how stressful it is. What we've got to get done in our 80 years if we lead a natural life. And it's like Anne Lamott said about motherhood or parenthood is that once you give birth to a child, you don't take another comfortable breath the rest of your life. There's stress, there's strain, there's worry, there's decay, there's so many pressures on us, but we kind of just say, well, they're normal because everybody else is living with them. But as a matter of argumentation, what she is saying here, I agree wholeheartedly that if you're going to say, 2 people in the plane crash survived, it's like, oh, God is so good. It's like, what about the 158 that died? If you're going to attribute the goodness to God, then you've also got to attribute the badness. Why did he let that happen? And that's way beyond a test. We are being, quote unquote, tested constantly. It's like, how much more crap can you dump on people on planet Earth? Do parents push their kids down the steps? This was an analogy I used to use. I would actually say this, and it would upset other Christians with whom I was friends. But I would say, would a parent push their kid down the steps to test how much they love them? That would be instant reason to dislike them, to distrust them, to separate from them. So the notion that somebody's child would be taken from them as a test of your love for me, that is way beyond even narcissistic implications. It's just would be pure evil to do that to somebody. So I do sympathize and understand her argument as she's making it so far.
all of the babies dying in extreme poverty across the world. It seems to me like God favors those who already live in affluent societies who have access to great medical care. But if you bring this up to believers, they'll say some nonsense about how God has to test some people. There's also just no evidence that God exists. And sure, I've heard tons of personal anecdotes about miracles and seeing things that couldn't be explained, but to me, every time I hear a story like that, there's always a more logical explanation for the phenomenon. Some say the human body is evidence that God exists, but it's riddled with design issues. We get addicted easily, our eyes are too weak, we need surgery constantly, and before modern medicine, women died in childbirth.
So the first point, she says most people are the religion of their parents, and maybe that's the case. Some people are unthinking about it or lukewarm even in their religion. I know a lot of converts. I don't know about you. Much of the world was converted.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the interesting things that sometimes we don't think about is that Christianity started not in the United States with Billy Graham. It started in the Middle East. This started in the heart of a different faith, right? And so much so that the founder of it, Jesus Christ, was accused of blasphemy and was crucified.
Also, she brings up the point of theodicy, which you mentioned earlier, the problem of suffering. She says there's something.
Now, I don't know. So my sense is that Christianity incorporated in it common elements of a worldview of what we commonly would like among one another. Not even among one another, but partly, but as far as getting along with each other and what we would like as far as creature comforts go. So now this is not just a chicken or the egg. Christianity came out of a world, or basically, formed in a world that already existed, and many of the elements of Christianity were borrowed from Greek philosophy, from Judaism, and other elements of the culture that existed then. So his argument that she's borrowing from the Christian worldview, it's like, well, she may be because she grew up in a world like that, but Christianity itself was formed in a world, yes, in the Middle East, as we call it now. It wasn't the Middle East then, but the Middle East now. But by virtue of that, the ideas were imported into Christianity. The Emperor Constantine, who converted to Christianity at some point, as theorized, he still held the title of Pontificus Maximus, which is like a Greek god. And it's right on the coins that were, even after his conversion, that were still printed on the coins that circulated throughout the Roman Empire. So there's a lot going on here about who influenced what. And so I'm not a fan of Kirk's point here.
Unjust about this. People get sick and they die. But I guess then my question would be, how do you know that's unjust?
That's right. She's just assuming there's such a thing as justice. She's also borrowing from the Christian worldview in order to make that statement. Yeah. So in a sense, she's like a kleptomaniac who's reaching into the house of the people she's disagreeing with, grabbing their stuff, and then framing an argument against them.
Right.
All right, I'm going to leave it go there. There is a fair amount of circularity in ways and also chicken or the egg type stuff. But we're begging the question where, of course, Kirk, because I think he's an evangelist now of some sort. I think I saw that on Wiki real quick. I needed to know who he was. I'd heard his name, but I wasn't quite sure, and it said that he's an evangelist. But here he said he used to be an atheist and so on. But, of course, he's coming from the standpoint that this is the way it is. There's entropy. Things go from a state of higher order to a state of higher disorder. In other words, they break down when forces act upon them, and they become more chaotic. And in many cases, like in evolutionary theory too, changes tend to kill off its host. But every so often, they help the host in the environment in which they live. And the theory of evolution is just that's how mankind came to be, that we managed to survive all these changes that were improvements. And that very well may be so. Kirk's standpoint is that we came into the world basically perfect. God created us. And then rebellion caused a breakdown. Now, is that one explanation? It is an explanation, and it's the one that he believes. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with people who don't accept those premises as far as what they see in the world. The young lady there made, I think, the most salient points as far as why she is an atheist. They're not dispositive by any stretch. Nobody's arguments are dispositive, in my view, because that gets into epistemological concerns and certain claims of certainty. I think Descartes attacked this existential question on the most elementary, rudimentary basis that he could find, which is, how do I know I exist? Not how do I know something else exists? How do I know I exist? And it came up with, I think, therefore I am. Even if we're a brain in a vat, let's just say all the sensory stimulation coming into me is not real. There's some kind of scientist. They always posit this as an evil scientist, but not necessarily so. It could be a good guy, good girl, I don't know. Pumping information into just a brain that's in a vat. That's all I am. And Descartes' position was very simply that, well, something is doing the thinking. Information is being pumped into this brain. If that is what constitutes me, it's still true that I am thinking, I am feeling, I am sensing what's being pumped into my brain. Therefore, I am. And fair enough, it's hard to refute that. Something is doing the thinking. But the woman in this, she made the most points too, and I agree with it, that if you're by and large a product of your upbringing, that seems to be fairly random. That the zygote, the embryo that formed in your mother's womb, then out it came, you're a product of your culture. And most people do abide by the politics of their family. Most people who grow up in the Middle East are going to be Muslim. People who grow up in North Korea are forced to believe in their great leader, Kim Jong-un, and prior to that, Kim Jong-il, his father. Wherever you grow up, you're influenced greatly by that culture. Not so much, and so that what the young lady was saying there was that it's not random. It isn't purposeful. It's not a measure of free will. You are influenced by the culture in which you grow up, which is in many cases established or greatly influenced by the family, your parents. So there were, I don't know, another 15 minutes left in the Tik-Tok thing, but I think we covered enough ground here. Maybe I'll revisit this and do the rest of it. But I just wanted to see, I'd like to know who the players are out there on the scene. Michael Knowles, coming from a Christian perspective, he seems like a pretty cool dude. Kirk does too. They weren't dickish about their perspective and going against them. But I analyze the arguments that are being made and how people stand in it. I like it when people stand in their arguments in a thoughtful way. The first woman on this that was mocking on the TikTok thing and acting and Sky Daddy and all that, that's not my style. Her thing wasn't so much for me. The other young lady, though, was very good, I thought. It was very thoughtful. She made good salient points. She wasn't mean or nasty about it. And either were Michael Knowles or Kirk Cameron. So that does it for this episode, folks. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave your comments. I know you will. I read the comments too, and I don't respond to all of them, but I respond to some of them. So if it's a good comment, I'll get back to you. All right, folks. Have a great day. See you on another video. Keep thinking theology.